All right. How am I on your screen? Well, hey everybody, Mike Griffith here. Welcome to today's Ingles on the Beat segment this Tuesday. Ready for more Georgia football talk? Ready for a little Georgia basketball talk? Got out ahead on the early enrollees, and I was really glad to see that Kirby Smart allowed these incoming freshmen to do that interview, a roundtable interview with DJ Shockley. I thought it was really revealing, and I've already done a couple of stories where I broke out the quotes, and it's always interesting to me when you listen to an interview and you watch an interview, you leave with a certain perception and certain takeaways just from the listening and watching, but then you break out and do a transcript of what everyone says, and I think that allows for a little more introspection. And so you've seen me on Dog Nation the last few days do a few different stories about Kendall Milton, the guy that you're looking at right there, who turned 18 years old and was named the California Running Back of the Year. Kendall, a guy at 6'2", 227. He keeps getting bigger. I don't think anybody's got a problem with 227 right now. You know Kirby likes to get downhill. But also Carson Beck. I've written a lot about Carson Beck yesterday, as well as today, the three things that I've noted. And then as well, we talked about a breakout candidate as linebacker. And I want to get your feedback on these guys. There you see Jeff Sentell talking with Kendall. Of course, Dog Nation was on this from the get-go. There was a private commitment in June that people didn't reveal, and then he made the public commitment. And Connor Riley and Jeff both went out to California for that as Dog Nation staffed that and brought you some of this footage just to kind of give you an idea where Kendall Milton comes from. At one point, a five-star running back, a guy that I believe could make an immediate impact. I think it's going to be very important for Kendall to show that he can catch the ball. The other question about Kendall coming from Fresno, California, while the high school football there is good, it's not great. So there will be some questions about his ability to adjust and adapt to the level of competition that he's going to have at Georgia and in the SEC. Now, one of the things that Kendall said that I found really interesting when Shockley was interviewing him was, the difference in Georgia from California. I mean, obviously, there's going to be some cultural differences that go beyond the In-N-Out burger versus the Zaxby's chain, but also the mentality that the football players here have. And Kendall said that at Georgia, what he noticed, and I think it's probably more specific to Kirby's Georgia Bulldogs, but I think it's probably true statewide when I look at how much Georgia has invested in their high school football, these beautiful high schools with these great football facilities, so much better than what you'll find in the surrounding states and Alabama or Tennessee or South Carolina, either the Carolinas. Georgia's school system does such a great job. So a shout out to the Georgia high schools and the Georgia taxpayers and voters that make sure you have great high schools here. But I think that plays a role in how well Georgia has been able to develop talent. But I think it also plays a role in the priority that the coaches, administrators, and it trickles down to the players. And finally getting to what Kendall said, he said that the players at Georgia put more emphasis on going out and getting it, being more assertive with knowing how to get what they want on a football field. California, the disease, quote-unquote disease of California, is that there's so many different things to do, that there's a lot of indifference. And that's why a guy like Kendall Milton comes to Georgia. You say, well, why would he go to Georgia when he could go to UCLA or USC? Both incredible schools academically, campus-wise, environment-wise, but you get lost out there. College football gets lost on the West Coast because there are so many other things to do. It's a lot more stratified. Whereas if you come down south, particularly the SEC, look, we're always football. Football's always on. We're talking football now. What's the date today? February 11th. There was nobody playing football, but we're talking football because it's football talking season, right? And in another month or so, I predict like right around March 18th or 19th, maybe 17th, Georgia will start their spring drills. They'll have their pro day, and then they'll start their drills the next day. They'll have their meeting and all that. The spring game, you might have saw the announcement, April 18th. So you back up from there. You know they're going to get 5 weeks in. They get 15 practice dates. Kirby typically likes to go Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. He's kind of a creature of habit. Not saying that he won't change it up, but I think he probably won't. They usually start after the Georgia spring break, which I believe, University of Georgia spring break, which I believe is the second week of March. So you're not that far off from Kendall Milton having the opportunity to compete with the likes of Zamir White and Kenny McIntosh. And I think that's going to be quite a battle. James Cook as well, another potential breakout guy. Now, it's kind of a chicken-egg question to me as far as what these running backs are going to do this year. You know, we talk about the offense, the new offense. There's Kenny McIntosh. Of course, I had the chance to go down and visit him in South Florida last May. That was another Dog Nation trip, and get to see him work out. And Kenny, a guy that I think has a lot of talent, a guy that I believe is very adept at catching the ball. I think Kenny McIntosh is the best all-around back. Not saying he's going to start. Not saying that he's going to be the best NFL guy. I don't know. I'm not saying that he's not either. But right now, when I look at his skill set, I think Kenny does everything, a little bit of everything better. For example, Zamir White gets downhill. He's north and south. He's a blazer. He's powerful. Does not catch the football well. Did not catch it well last year. Now, that may change. All right, we may see Zamir catch the ball better in spring drills. Kenny catches the ball well. He runs between the tackles, and he runs outside the tackles. All-around game at about 215. We'll see if Kendall Milton can give you that all-around game at 227. James Cook, I don't think, does a good enough job between the tackles. And I don't know that he really wants to. I see Cook as a guy that you want to get out in space. Might even line him up a little bit in the slot in this new offense. So when I think about the all-around backs, I think about Kenny, and I think about where Kendall might go with this. And then I wonder how much Zamir's improved his pass catching. Any way you slice it, you got four really talented guys there. And I've heard nothing but great things about Dejon Edwards. I've heard that this addition actually may be with the new offense in mind. I know everybody was flipping their lid and headlines were going crazy about, I even hate to say Zach Evans' name. Everybody was wanting this and wanting that because he was the 5-star. Listen, there's a reason he's not at Georgia. And there's a reason that Dejon Edwards is. And Kirby Smart is the GM here. And you've got to look for the best fit. Not necessarily the best natural talent. The closest thing to Zach Evans that I can recall was when I was covering Tennessee, and they had the running back out of Kansas, Bryce, and I'm trying to remember his last name. He didn't do hardly anything. Connor?
Bryce Brown.
Bryce Brown, thank you. And it was all about Bryce Brown for a month. They also signed a guy by the name of David Oku late. And both of these guys were just off-the-charts guys. Bryce Brown didn't do anything in college. He did nothing at Tennessee, and he transferred out and was a flop. He got signed in the NFL and did nothing there. But he was the guy that everybody had to have. He was the guy with all the ratings. And I'm not saying that Evans is going to flop, but what I am saying is it doesn't always work out the way you think it will. Hey, look, there's Kenny McIntosh. The story on Kenny McIntosh, backstory, this is a good example of this. So when Kenny McIntosh went to Alabama on an unofficial visit before the start of his senior season, he was being recruited by the Tide. There was a list left out on an assistant coach's desk. And I'll just say that the family, quote unquote, the family saw the list. And this particular coach was assigned to these particular recruits. Kenny was listed in a category that said second tier. And he'll never forget this. This story will come up this year, I guarantee it. Before the Alabama game, September 19th, hopefully Kirby will make Kenny McIntosh available, and I will ask him about the second tier, and he will tell the story. I mentioned it a little bit in some of the lead-up stuff I did on Kenny, but my point is this. Recruiting is its own world. Once guys get to campus, hit the reset button. Hit the reset button because the stars go out the window. It's like Cameron Kenny told me last week when I was at Collins Hill High School. And I was talking with him and his mom and his dad and the Collins Hill coach. And Cameron told me that Georgia says when you come, you're going to work, you're going to work, you're going to work some more. And once you're on campus, the stars don't matter, right? And I would tell you that the stars don't matter at any position group, particularly in the backfield. And we don't yet know what the offense is going to look like under Todd Monken. We do know that Kirby Smart told us last Wednesday that he didn't have some grand statement about what it was going to be, that he was going to open up anything. In other words, don't expect Georgia to throw it 40 or 50 times. Kirby wants the same thing. Two things primarily. I can give you three, okay? Don't turn the football over, okay? That's at the top of the list, the ball security. Maybe you want to group that with efficiency, but he wants efficiency and he wants explosive plays. That those two things are at the top of the Kirby Smart list. Now, you as a fan, me as a journalist, I may want more pass plays, more 2-minute, more up tempo, more downhill, whatever. You may have facets of the game. Look, all Kirby wants is efficiency and explosive plays, right? Just go out there and do it. And if you don't do it, there's going to be changes. Now, getting back to this offensive identity, I don't think Monken comes in with a predetermined offense and says, all right, Kirby, here's the playbook. Here it is. This is what I do. That's not how it works. It's let's take a look at the talent that we have. Let's see what our running backs do well. Maybe Zamir White doesn't catch the ball as well as the other three back, but does he run downhill effectively enough that you want him on the field for the first 2 snaps of every series, right? Or every set of downs? Or do you need that guy that can do both things out there on first down? Well, let's just see who's good at what. Every great coach, whether we're talking about Nick Saban or Todd Monken, and what Monken did at Tampa Bay, getting the absolute most, probably even more out of Jameis Winston and Ryan Fitzpatrick. To me, that was the greatness of Todd Monken. That not only did he have a system that set a franchise record offensively and led the NFL in passing yards, but he did it with 2 quarterbacks that, in my mind, by NFL standards, are pretty mediocre. Mediocre might even be generous, where Ryan Fitzpatrick and Jameis Winston are concerned. Now, last year he's with the Browns, and Freddie Kitchens called the plays. And again, I know Freddie. I think Freddie's a good football coach. Freddie earned that opportunity working under Bruce Arians. It's not like Freddie was a bad coach. It's not like Freddie couldn't call plays. But it's like, why do you have Todd Monken if you're not going to use him, right? And so there was a clash there. And as Monken told other people in the NFL, it got out. He said it was a total mess. And he goes from that total mess now to an ideal situation where he's going to be working with Matt Luke down there in the offensive room, and they're going to mesh with Kirby Smart. It really is an ideal coaching situation. But getting back to the thoughts on Kendall Milton and where he fits in, and Kenny McIntosh and Zamir White, it depends on what they do in practices. And then a guy like Monken and a guy like Matt Luke look at it and say, all right, this is how, Luke said, this is how good I think the offensive line is. This is what I think we can do effectively. And Monken can look at it and say, well, here's what I think about this receiver group that are on campus. And here's what I think about Carson Beck and Dwan Mathis and Jamie Newman. And this is where I think we're suited. So you look at the talent and you look at the personnel, and then you design an offense around that. And LSU did a great job with that, right? LSU did a great job last year applying that with Joe Brady, some of the principles he learned at Penn State of the RPO, some of the things that he brought from the New Orleans Saints. But you know what? I would tell you that the Tennessee Titans did a great job with Derrick Henry and how they schemed for him. It's kind of like maximizing your talent. So I think we all need to get away from this idea of a preconceived offense and understand that these coaches are going to collectively evaluate their players and then devise the best scheme around it. And as I wrote earlier this spring, the huge advantage they have is the ultimate litmus test of what I will confidently tell you is the best defense in the nation coming back. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. The numbers tell you, the play tells you. I mean, my goodness, Florida didn't even score a touchdown the first 3 quarters. I don't believe Auburn did either. Now, I don't know what this zone was or this defense Kirby went to in the fourth quarter, and he's kind of shy about getting into the details, but there was something different with how they call defense with big leads. That'll be something I'll be interested to see if he adjusts, because Kirby Smart is always working to get better, right? He's the if it ain't broke, make it better. That's the Kirby slogan, which I absolutely love and have tried to internalize, and I would recommend you do that in your daily lives as well. There's a reason guys like Kirby Smart make $7 or $6 million a year. They're incredible leaders. They have great visions. I was talking with Greg McGarity Saturday at the basketball game. I did a story Sunday on kind of updating. There's some pictures of the $80 million football building. And I was talking to McGarity about that building, and McGarity was telling me, the great thing for him as an athletic director about having a head coach like Kirby Smart is that Kirby has a vision, and Kirby can vocalize that. And when you're the AD, you just want to do what's best for your coaches and for your programs. Now, sometimes you don't always agree with your coaches, but most of the time, if you've hired these coaches, you delegate to them. There's a reason you hired them, and there's a reason you give them time, because you hear their ideas out and you believe in them, and then you do what you can do as an athletic director to support them, like the schedule, for example. It's so funny to me when I hear people, McGarity, but it wasn't Greg McGarity. Kirby Smart is in control of the schedule. There's a reason those games got flipped. Now, Kirby didn't necessarily say, I want the Auburn game here in the Tennessee. No. Kirby said, I want A, B, and C. And as a result of that, those games get flipped. That's how it works. McGarity works with Kirby Smart, okay? Kirby doesn't work under McGarity. McGarity doesn't do everything Kirby. They work together in tandem. Kirby tells his AD what he wants, and then his AD tries to make that happen. And I think the facilities are the greatest example of that. We're up to about $172 million in facilities since Kirby Smart has been hired that Georgia has put in, whether we're talking about the indoor House of Pain at $30.2 million, or whether we're talking about the West End Zone at $60 or $63 million. Now you've got this $80 million building, which is really necessary. It always amazes me to hear Georgia fans say, well, we got everything we need. Well, do you? Because 24/7 recently ranked you 18th in facilities in the country and 8th in the SEC. Kentucky has better football facilities than Georgia. Now, you may say, no, wait a minute. Because when we think facility, we just think of Sanford Stadium. And I will tell you that in my opinion, Sanford Stadium is one of the top 5 game day environments in the country. And I've been most places now. I love it. I love the way it opens up to the street. Just the hedges, the tradition. It's just dripping with tradition. The setting. I think Georgia's game day, the town of Athens, it all goes together. It's just an incredible place. So you say that, you go, well, that's better than Kentucky's Kroger. Well, it is. But when we talk about facilities, we're talking about indoor football facility. We're talking about weight room. We're talking about locker rooms. For example, Clemson, what they did in 2017 with their $55 million facility, they made that a place that was so effective, efficient, that the players wanted to spend their spare time there. And when you can create that sense of community where the players are around each other all the time, that's when the magic happens. If there's one thing that I don't say would be critical, but I would be aware of, is that oftentimes the Georgia players kind of go their own way when they're off. I don't see the same amount of togetherness that I've seen at other schools. All right? And I'm not saying that they got to go to the same movies every Thursday and Friday night. And I'm not saying that they don't have good esprit de corps. They do. But they don't have it to the extent of some other places, Clemson being one of them. The football building will be a rallying point, will be a place where these athletes will hang together. And that will promote even better chemistry. Now, I think it's good, but I think it needs to be great. I feel like the 2017 Georgia team had that. And I felt like in 2018 and 2019, there were some leadership voids that needed to be filled. Look, let's not beat around the bush. Last spring, there were 6 arrests in 6 weeks. That was a problem, okay? And then you lost J.J. Holloman, and to me, that was a pivotal blow. If you got J.J. Holloman last year, I think this offense looks a lot different. I'm not saying you to beat LSU, but I do think you to beat South Carolina. My point is, what Georgia's doing with facility is moving the program forward. And with Kirby Smart, it is done. So when people say to me, oh, look on paper, he's got the same record as Mark Richt after. I said, no. You can't just measure it on the record. You've got to measure it on the environment. And just you as fans, and I'm going to look here at some comments. Don't you feel different? Don't you? And I don't want to bash Mark Richt. I think Mark Richt is a Hall of Fame coach. Some people may argue that, but I think it's a slam dunk. I think he's a tremendous ambassador. I think he represented Georgia and to the highest degree. I think he was universally respected nationally, and I think he plays a big role on why Georgia has such a tremendous identification outside the state looking in. I don't know anybody that disrespects or doesn't like Georgia or has a bad thing to say, other than, the silly people on Twitter that are rivals. Anybody that's been to Georgia, anybody that has dealt with the great Vince Dooley or with Mark Richt, they have nothing but good things to say about Georgia football because of these men. So I want to make it very clear that in complimenting Kirby Smart, I'm not being critical of the men that preceded him because I think they're Hall of Famers. Mark Richt and Vince Dooley, obviously Vince Dooley. But don't you as a Georgia fan have a different feeling about Georgia football now than you did with Coach Richt? I mean, Coach Richt did a nice job of elevating, raising the bar where every year you expected Georgia to win 10 or 11 games. That's just what you expected. If Georgia doesn't win 10 or 11 games, it's a bad season. If Georgia's not contending in the East, it's a bad season. I remember looking in, and maybe I was naive, but every year I watched the Georgia-Florida game, I didn't know who'd win. Now some Georgia people, we lost that game however many years in a row to Spur. I never got to the point where I didn't think Georgia couldn't win that game. Because I'd see Georgia, play against Tennessee. I knew they were awful darn good. So I didn't understand the whole Spurrier thing. I wasn't covering Georgia then. I did understand the Spurrier thing with Tennessee, though, because Spurrier was from Tennessee and he came back to haunt his home state because they wouldn't change their offense for him. They wouldn't change out of the single wing. So he went to Florida and ended up haunting them. So I understood that Spurrier rivalry, but I didn't really understand the Spurrier. Now I get it because now I go on these shows. I did Buddy Martin's Gator Bait show last night, and the level of, what's the word I'm looking for? Animosity towards Georgia is pretty incredible. But it's well earned. It's not animosity like you got a stinky, horrible program you cover. It's, we think we can be good enough to be. And I said to Buddy Martin, Tennessee and Florida could challenge. He said, no. It's Georgia and Florida and then Tennessee. And I'm thinking, no, really, it's Georgia and then Florida and Tennessee. That's kind of how I see it. I don't know how you see it. But don't you have a different feeling now about Georgia football with Kirby Smart than you did under Mark Richt? And I know there's critics and, Kirby hasn't gotten over the hump and all this silliness. And, they lost a couple of close games to Alabama that they would have, could have, should have won. I get it. I was there for both of them. I thought Georgia was the better team on both occasions. But things happen in football. I don't put it all on Kirby, but I do put it all on the fact that it wasn't a complete Kirby culture. When I look at some of the meltdowns and when I look at some of the players that failed, they weren't Kirby Smart players. Okay? You've had a full cycle of Kirby Smart now. This is year 5. So we're talking about 5 recruiting classes. The guys on the team, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2, are Kirby Smart guys. And they've been brought up hearing the same language spoken. And there's a certain way Kirby does things. And there's a certain level that these players are expected to elevate to. And I think once a coach has been there for a full cycle, then I think it's fair to evaluate him. I think it's very fair to evaluate Kirby on this season. Even though he's got what would look like on the outside is a complete reload on offense, I think it's fair to evaluate Kirby. Listen, he's had to replace two offensive coordinators now, right? Chaney and Coley, and he had to replace Mel Tucker. And I think Dan Lanning was a smash hit. I think George is fortunate that Dan Lanning is still here. I think Dan Lanning could have got the Memphis job. In fact, I talked to somebody at Memphis about Dan Lanning when they were interested in him. I got a call, and I told him, I said, this guy's a slam dunk. He'll be a great hire. They didn't go in that direction, or Dan didn't take the job. I don't know what worked out, but Dan Lanning is a star. He's only going to be around another year or two, just so you know. Looking at your comments now, Jonathan Moore says, yeah, I'm 30 now instead of 15. So Jonathan looks at Georgia football different as an adult than he did as a kid. Rode Williams here can win several national championships in a row. Rode, that the several national championships in a row thing, that's interesting because that kind of trickles into my next analysis here. And I hope you've had a chance to read the stories that I've done on Carson Beck the last couple days. And admittedly, Jeff Sentell was way, way, way out in front on Carson Beck and has done so much good work on Carson Beck. A lot of the research I did, I would click Carson Beck and it would be one of Jeff's great articles and background on Carson Beck. But I had a chance to make a read on him based on what I saw and based on things I've heard from my people, right? It's all a matter of perspective, whether it's myself or Connor or Jeff or BA. We all kind of have our focal point, right? Our angle that we're looking at something from the room based on what we know, where we've been, who we've been around, and who we talk to. So we may not always come to the same conclusion, but we've all researched it and looked at it from different perspectives. And I'd like to think that you all getting those different perspectives gives you more to kind of put in your potpourri, to put in your soup, your seasoning, to figure out what you like. You want some more Connor Riley hot sauce? Or do you want some BA oregano in this, right? Everybody's kind of got their flavor and their thoughts on players and perspective. And my takeaway on Carson Beck is that this is a guy, an ultra-competitive guy, and it's going to be very hard for Carson not to just jump out and be the guy right away because he's ready, and he wants it, and he knows he can do it. And when you've played at the highest classification level in Florida, that means something. Just like if you've played over there in Metro Atlanta, or in South Florida, or around Dallas, Texas, or in Southern California, or in Detroit. There's certain regions of the country where there's just there is a different level of high school ball. And Carson Beck has played it. So is Dwan Mathis, by the way. But Dwan still has that hurdle to get cleared after the brain surgery. He's got to wait till May till he can start knocking heads again, at least where they'll approve of him doing it. He wants to do it now. They got to hold him back. But for Carson, a guy with that kind of arm talent, a guy with that type of experience and confidence, the hardest thing is going to be the patience. Because Kirby's not going to just put somebody out there on the field and say, you're 1, you're 2, you're 3. No, that's not how it works, okay? They're competing right now in off-season workouts. They're earning their respect from their teammates by their work ethic, by when they show up, by who's staying late, by who's pushing through drills. That hierarchy is getting sorted out right now. Now, nobody's charting it. I don't think so. Now, I've been places at Michigan State. Mark D'Antonio would give a gold jersey to the hardest working guys, and every day they'd show up, and there'd be a different colored jersey in their locker based on their work ethic. I don't think Georgia does that. We're not behind the scenes for those individual workouts. But whether the players know it or not, they're sorting themselves out amongst one another. They know who works the hardest. They know who's the fastest. They know who's the strongest. They know who's the most athletic. Great example of that. And I absolutely loved writing this story yesterday. I went to a local Starbucks and dug in on Adam Anderson. Because watching again, going back to Kirby Smart, allowing those freshmen to talk. Just the little nuggets of information you get. And DJ said, is there anybody on the team that just jumps out at you guys? And one of the guys said, well, we kind of look at his peer. And Major Byrne goes, no, we got this guy named Adam. And he's about 6'6", this linebacker named, he's about 6'5", and he runs about a 4.3 40. He says, I ain't never seen that in high school. And you got to imagine, right? some 18-year-old guy coming on campus and seeing a 20-year-old Adam Anderson in his third year. Adam Anderson was the number 1 OLB in his signing class. He was a 5-star. And he's played situationally, as most guys on defense do. Remember, Georgia had 37 guys play 100 or more snaps on defense last year. That was one of Dan Lanning's secrets. One of the things that makes him a great coach. One of the things Kirby Smart likes. And you can bet Kirby Smart's involved in that too. He is still the de facto D coordinator. It's still Kirby's D. But Lanning does such an amazing job, and Kirby's complimented him, saying he thinks outside the box. Listen, if you impress Kirby Smart as a defensive coach, you're special. Dan Lanning did that, right? Getting back to Lanning. But getting back to Adam Anderson, so I'm going, could this be the breakout year for Adam? You know, Adam last year had a quarterback sack in that Baylor game. He really kind of stifled that Baylor drive. Baylor was trying to get in it with a 2-minute drive before halftime. You may not remember. It was 19-0. I mean, Georgia dominated that game. But it's 19-0, and Baylor's trying to get a little something going in the first half, or at the end of the first half of the Sugar Bowl. And it's the final possession before halftime, and Adam gets a sack. Huge play. The game before, now nobody's going to think that the game against LSU was any sort of defensive classic. 37-10 is certainly not a memorable number. But Adam Anderson had 5 QB pressures, more than anybody on the team. You know, Kirby devised a great scheme. I was talking with Steve Emsminger this year, the LSU offensive coordinator, in New Orleans before the Clemson game. And he said Georgia showed us stuff we hadn't seen all year. And I need to find those quotes, and I need to do a story on it, and I promise I will. I promise I'll get to that story. But LSU's plan was we're just going to keep throwing until we can figure out what they're doing. Kirby had a great plan. They were oh so close. But look at Adam. I mean, on the far left. Does he not look a little freakish in an athletic kind of way? I mean, this guy is going to play on Sundays in the NFL. And the fact that Major Burns could identify this, the players always know. But of all the players, and there's a lot of special guys at Georgia, of all the players, Major Burns picks out Adam Anderson. That says a lot to me. Now, Georgia has got a depth of outside linebackers that will absolutely keep opposing quarterbacks sleepless the night before games. Azeez Ojulari is amazing. I was late to the party. Centel told me last year before the Texas game, keep an eye on him. I said, how can it be, Jeff? And Azeez has been everything and more than anybody could have expected. And Jermaine Johnson was the number 1 JUCO linebacker. I thought he came in. Remember, Jermaine was there on the final play of the game with Nolan Smith, or the final Notre Dame offensive play of the game. It was Nolan and Jermaine that chased Ian Book out of the pocket on that 4th down. Those guys, those newcomers, and DJ back there, Daniel in coverage, those 3 newcomers were the ones that came up with the stop that beat Notre Dame ultimately. Jermaine Johnson, key. And Nolan Smith. You just can't say enough about Nolan. He was the overall number 1 recruit. Wasn't able to beat out Azeez, which says everything about Azeez. But it tells you the depth. When you've got 4 NFL talents like Georgia does at outside linebacker, and there's Nolan, glasses off. Interestingly enough, I actually lived in the same apartment building with Nolan for a few months and ran into him a couple times in the elevator. Not physically, thank goodness, I would have gone through a wall, but bumped into him and exchanged short conversation. What an incredibly polite young man. I mean, you would never believe that he's this man-eater on the football field when you meet him in person. I mean, he has this professional look, tone, respect, yes, sir, no, just as much as anything, what I like about this class is the kids that Kirby Smart recruited. And I know a lot of you going, oh, who cares, just win. No, it matters. It really matters. These character guys like Nolan Smith matter. These character guys like Cameron Kinney, the kid I talked, these guys matter. Okay? These are the guys that do the right things. These are the guys that take over the locker room, that build the esprit de corps, that plant the seed in the back of someone's mind that maybe I shouldn't drive around downtown Athens at midnight with an open container of alcohol and a gun in a glove box. Maybe that's a bad idea. Maybe that's a bad idea. Maybe I shouldn't get in when the bouncer Cloud tells me he doesn't like my shoes. Maybe I shouldn't. Or the fraternity guys pick on. maybe I should just walk away and not get arrested, right? These are the little things, these little stupid little things that sidetrack a program, right? It comes down to leadership from within. And Kirby talks about player-led teams. That's what he means. Because the coaches can give you the framework. They can hand you the playbook. They can give you the company rule book. And they can say, follow these directions. But it doesn't mean the same as if your teammate is telling you that and pulling you back and going, no, we're leaving. It's 11 o'clock. Nothing good is going to happen. Let's go get something to eat, right? When you've got guys like that leading, good things happen. And right now, more than anything, that's what Georgia needs. And as I look at Carson Beck, and as I look at Jamie Newman and Dwan Mathis and Stetson Bennett, these quarterbacks that are leaders by nature, they've got to set the tone for the offense. And guys like Nolan Smith and Adam Anderson and Azeez Ojulari and Monty Rice and Richard LeCount, they got to set the tone defensively. So there's a lot going on in this offseason that I'm excited about. A lot of these players, these newcomers, Justin Robinson, for example. And I know he's one of the lesser heralded receivers. They signed 3 top 75 guys, Marcus Roseme, Jermaine Burton, Arian Smith. But listening to Justin Robinson talk made me think this guy might exceed expectations. He's an early enrollee, which I think gives him a huge leg up. He's a big target at 6'4", and he's confident. Very confident guy. He rooms with Kendall Milton. He's got big visions, and I would just say I would make him a sleeper right now to be on the field a lot. Again, I know that Arian Smith and Jermaine Burton and Marcus Roseme come in with the higher rankings. It's interesting talking with Jeff and Connor and BA. We all kind of have our guys that we think are the best of the group. Again, those different perspectives for different reasons. What matters is what the coaches think ultimately. And we'll get a chance to see him at the G-Day game. And won't that be great on April 18th to see all these guys, at least to see Justin Robertson and Kendall Milton play and Carson Beck and Dwan Mathis and see what these guys can do. And then you look at the guys that come in, and I just shake my head. I'm just shaking my head here. Keely Ringo, I don't think he's going to start, but he's going to play. I can't wait to see Darnell Washington. I cannot wait to see Darnell Washington at tight end with Trey McKitty. I mean, I thought Kirby did a great job bringing in Eli Wolf last year, but I think Darnell Washington and Trey McKitty are immediate threats at tight end. Jermaine Burton, we talked about. I know Jeff is very high on him. Arian Smith is a flyer, speed guy, which, that's going to change how your safeties play. Georgia was missing that last year. Felt like Demetrius Robertson's hamstring really robbed him of that, and they didn't really have that guy, which really enabled defenses to creep up. Jalen Carter, it's really hard for a young defensive lineman to play right away. Jordan Davis, we saw emerge a couple years ago, the second half of his freshman year. I think Jalen Carter is further along. I think he'll be a factor. And then the offensive line, Tate Radlich and Broderick Jones. And I know Connor did a story researching the last 5 or 6 cycles, because Kirby likes to do that. He likes to challenge you, like he did when he said, go look at the film. We run the same plays at LSU. Well, on signing day, he said, look it up. How many freshmen have started? Well, here's the thing. The reason why the historical value of that should not be lost on anyone. There's no doubt that starting at offensive tackle is probably harder than starting at any position except maybe defensive tackle, and maybe not even that, because at offensive tackle, you've got to swallow up so much of the playbook. And it's about so much more about you got to be athletic and big and handle some of the best athletes in the world coming from that defensive end position. Guys like Adam Anderson and Azeez Ojulari and Nolan Smith, you got to be able to handle them at 18 years old, right? But I think what makes this different is I look at Jones and Ratledge, and I see 2 of the top 5 guys. Now, I don't know that Georgia's had 2 of the top 5 guys in the same class in a year where they've lost their starting offensive tackles, and not just their top 2 offensive tackles, but arguably their top 3. When they started Cade Mays there in the Sugar Bowl, that suggested to me they felt like Cade was more ready than Xavier Truss. So it's going to be interesting to see what Warren McClendon and Xavier Truss do in spring drills. I think Kirby's let them know with his comment that when he was asked about the importance of Broderick Jones in this class with the departure of his tackles, he said what was more important was recruiting Warren McClendon and Xavier Truss the year before. But those were top 250 guys, right? These are top 50, top 25. These guys were, Truss and McClendon were both at the fringe of the top 20. I want to say 18 and 19. Ratledge and Jones are like, 1 and 2 or 3 and 4, depending. So now that year that you spent at Georgia marinating, working out, training table, working in practice against the best defense in the country, there's a value to that. And Truss and McClendon will have another spring of that. They'll have one more leg up. I'll just say, Ratledge and Jones, by the end of next season, I would bet that one of them will be starting. One of them will be starting. I can't give you a scenario. People get injured. Keelan Richter's calling me out on Colquitt County in South Georgia. And Keelan Richter, with all due respect, Colquitt County speaks for itself. And there is some tremendous high school football in South Florida. No doubt. South Georgia. No doubt about it. Kirby Smart would tell you that too, right? But the depth in Metro Atlanta is a little deeper, okay? A little bit bigger and a little bit deeper. Not saying that these schools couldn't compete, because I think they could in selective games. But when I look at the depth of Metro Atlanta, I just feel like it's deeper than South Georgia. I'm not saying that best on best is an equal, but when I look at the depth, if that makes sense to you. Do I think one of the quarterbacks will transfer this year? Ro Hawkins wants to know. I think it's a possibility. It's kind of a yes-no question. Jamie Newman's a one-year guy. So if you're Dwan Mathis or you're Carson Beck or you're Stetson Bennett, you know that Jamie Newman's not going to be here next year. So you could theoretically be 1 year away from playing. You're not looking at Brock Vandegrift, even though most of us are looking at Brock Vandegrift as saying, this guy is unbelievable, right? You're thinking you're going to beat the incoming guy out. So if you feel like it's a two-horse race, and a lot of it has to do with how they're managed. I don't mind telling you that things with James Coley could get testy at times. Same thing happened with Jim Chaney. Jim Chaney wasn't the most popular guy with the players, right? I don't know what Monken's relationship is going to be like. I don't even know that Monken's the quarterback's coach. I know he's the coordinator. We're still waiting to find out what Kirby's going to do with that extra spot. We think it's offense. We think maybe Buster Faulkner, but that hasn't happened yet. There's a lot of variables to this, okay? It's hard for me right now to give you an educated guess, is what I'm saying. You could speculate. There are scenarios where somebody would leave, but I think there's also scenarios where nobody leaves. So that my educated opinion right now is I don't have enough information and perspective on this to feel comfortable giving you a yes or a no, as much as I would just say I think there's scenarios where people could leave, and I think there's scenarios where everybody comes back. That's where I'm at with it right now. I don't want to overextend myself. Sinard Watson, once we win the national championship, it will start a chain. I think that's more possible for Georgia than I think it is for LSU right now. And the reason why is because I feel like the West, even though if you look at how the East has done against the West the last 2 years, I'll give Mullen this. One of my first assignments was to go out to the Bruce Arians golf tournament. And I don't know if y'all remember that, but Kirby and Dan Mullen were both out there wearing pink shirts that day. And we got a picture of it somewhere. It's pretty funny. But Mullen predicted that the East would be better. And we all thought, well, Dan, you're just saying that because you've gone from Mississippi State to Florida. But he proved correct. The East, I believe, had a winning record. And I'm not sure. It might have been even last year, close to it. But the depth of the East has really improved. Kentucky, Tennessee's rebound, South Carolina has been okay. Whereas the West had some fall off, particularly at Arkansas. Mississippi State fell off a little bit last year. It'd be very interesting to see what happens at the Mississippi schools. In short, I don't think much. I think that they win the press conference. I think they move the needle on Twitter. If you want some entertaining quotes, Mike Leach is your guy. If you want a Twitter follow Lane Kiffin. I think they're both a little outrageous, but I don't think either one of them is going to do enough to play in an SEC championship game. I don't think Ole Miss or Mississippi State is going to have that sort of success. I think it's the usual suspects. Alabama, Auburn, LSU, and now Texas A&M joins the party. I think Jimbo Fisher is moving the needle. I think that's worth watching. I think he's a rising power. If we were talking global politics, I would put everyone on alert that I think A&M might have nuclear weapons now. They're really doing some things recruiting-wise and facility-wise. And Jimbo's a good coach. He's a good coach, and now he's got Coley helping him out. And I think Coley's a good coach and certainly a good recruiter. I think that was a boon for Jimbo to get James Coley. A perfect scenario would have been Coley sticking around and wanting to work with Monken and Matt Luke. But I guess, what the whole thing, too many chiefs, not enough Indians, is that what they say? That old saying, or too many cooks spoil the soup, however you want to put it. I think Georgia and Kirby have got a great balance right now with Matt Luke in that room with Monken. I sense watching those practices, and they opened up some practices in New Orleans, watching Matt Luke in those practices, and even seeing some of the pictures of him with these recruits. The enthusiasm level that Matt Luke has brought to Georgia football has just been beyond anything I could have expected. Look, Matt Luke was the head coach of his alma mater, and he took over a pretty rotten situation at Ole Miss. And I thought he did a decent job. Not a great job. I thought he did a decent job. And he gets fired. That's got to just tear your heart out. If you're Matt Luke and you played at Ole Miss and you took that job when nobody else wanted it after that Hugh Freeze and all that NCAA garbage, and you have some decent success like he did, and you stay away from any NCAA, and your own school fires you, that had to be absolutely heartbreaking. But to see how Matt Luke responded come to Georgia less than 48 hours after Sam Pittman went to Arkansas, it's been incredible. They talk about how adversity reveals character, and I think we're seeing a lot about Matt Luke's character. There is no doubt in my mind that Matt Luke will once again be a head coach. No question. No ifs, ands, or buts. In Georgia, you better hope you keep him for 2 or 3 years. But I see a connect with Kirby and Matt Luke. And did you know they actually played against each other once? They were on the same field, maybe twice, at least once. About the same age, speak the same language. There is a connection there that's uncanny. And there's a mutual respect there. That chemistry, when you've got, when you create that synergy, you put those two guys together and the sum is greater than the part. I sense something really special happening for the Georgia football staff with Matt Luke and Kirby. Now, you brought in Monken, the professor, the mad scientist, to work in the lab. But Luke, to me, is the guy that binds Monken and Kirby. Because Kirby's his own mad scientist, right? Kirby's his own Dr. Frankenstein in the defensive lab with Dan Lanning and Charlton Warren and those guys, okay? And I see Monken at the other end of the spectrum. And I've seen it before where sometimes you could have a coach, an offensive-minded coach, that is that detached from the head coach, that they just don't speak. I'll give you a great example of that. At Alabama, Gene Stallings. I think Kirby Smart is a lot like Gene Stallings. A lot like Gene Stallings. Both former defensive backs, both grizzled in their own way. The same type of relationships with players, very aggressive with the coaching staffs, and very similar football philosophy. Gene was not able to connect as well as anyone would have liked at that time with the great Homer Smith. And I don't know if you know who Homer Smith is, but Google him. He was a football offensive pioneer, one of the best but they just didn't speak the same language. And there needed to be an intermediary between them. And that guy is a guy named Woody McCorvey, who is the guy behind Dabo Swinney's success at Clemson right now. My point is, for any staff to come together, you've got to have glue guys. You've got to, it's like I was talking about the team earlier in the show. You got to have program guys. it's not one person, it's people. It's a culture that you create. And the people that you hire, your employees, help create that culture that brings everyone together. And you've seen it in several successful corporations. I'm sure many of you can relate to that with whatever office that you work for. I feel like here at Cox Enterprises, there's a culture in this building. When I come in this building, I feel it, right? I'm proud to walk in these doors because of the culture and the employees and the people that have worked here for years and the reputation that the family built. And I'm sure all of you can relate to that with your respective company and your respective bosses or fellow employees. Some probably really well. Maybe you're sitting in a situation where you say, well, it's not as good as it's. That happens on a football team. It's no different. And Kirby Smart's the CEO. And he's brought in a VP and Matt Luke that can help him with his message. He can help Kirby help himself. And he can also help Kirby, I think, with Todd Monken. And that's what's going to happen this spring. There's going to be a lot of meetings. There's going to be a lot of discussion about personnel. And there's going to be a lot of arguments and debates on what they should do. And that's just part of it. But how well do they work through those discussions? How well do those relationships grow through those discussions? They can't go the other way. You can't get mad because you didn't get your way. I'm telling you, Matt Luke is going to prove to be the most pivotal hire on the Georgia football staff this offseason. Let's take a look here. Tobias Hickman, golf, pink shirts, prediction, real is real, and showing is real. UGA should have kept Brian McClendon. UGA hiring Matt is a slap in the face to tradition. Wow. Well, I don't think Brian McClendon coaches the offensive line, does he? Because Matt Luke coaches the offensive line. And when you lost Sam Pittman, you needed to find somebody that could coach the offensive line and recruit the offensive line and keep the recruits that you have in the class and land Broderick Jones and land Tate Radlich, right? And make sure that you hung on to the center, Cedric Van Pran. So Matt Luke was the fit. You needed an offensive line coach. Not only did you get an offensive line coach, you got a great offensive coach who was also a former coordinator as well as head coach. Some things Brian McClendon hadn't been a head coach and hadn't been an offensive line coach. So sometimes it's about the fit. Now maybe if the running, maybe had Del McGee left, maybe we're talking about something different. And thank goodness Del McGee didn't leave. And silly me, one of the first things I should have done was go through the media. I covered Del McGee as a player. I covered 93 Auburn. I can't wait to talk to Del. Kirby doesn't make his guys available to the media, but I want to talk to him about 93 Auburn, the best team you never saw. That was an incredible first year on the beat there. Matt Talley wants to write some articles on special teams and do it on the clock at your job. Matt, I'm not sure how your employers would feel about that, but feel free to make your comments known in here. Feel free to follow me on Twitter at MikeGriffith32. I'm about to sign out. It's been a great show. I always enjoy talking with you folks on the Ingles on the Beat show and kind of spreading some ideas and thoughts. Best position group, linebacker, DB. I'm going DB, John. Love these DBs. This could be the best secondary I've ever covered, and I've covered some special ones. Really like Richard LeCount coming back. Really impressed with Lewis Seen in the Sugar Bowl. And they've got 4 corners that are going to play in the NFL. There's no doubt about it. I like the DBs a lot. Offense, there's questions, but it's exciting because I think they have the talent to fill these questions. I think they've got the personnel they need. I'm going to sign out now. I'm going to thank all of you for joining me again. I'm going to invite you, follow me on Twitter, please, at MikeGriffith32. I like seeing positive reinforcement on there. Usually the Twitter stuff I get is other fan bases coming at me, usually with anonymous names. It's always good to see that swell of Georgia support when the Dog Nation rises up. It says, wait a minute, we got facts here, Florida. We got facts here, Tennessee. South Carolina, enjoy your day in the sun. I'm at MikeGriffith32. And also, I will tell you, you need to get in the Dog Nation forum. You'll see myself in there, Connor's in there, BA's in there, Jeff's in there. that's a really good place for us to kind of have, kind of off camera, out of public view, just kind of discussions and comments, right? You do it on Twitter, you feel like the world's watching, You can only write so many articles. There's only so much time in a show to interact. But when you go on our forum, you can have these little private side discussions. So go to our Dog Nation forum, become an insider, sign up for our notifications. I can tell you I send out notifications. I know Jeff and Connor and BA do. If you want to know anything going on, your phone buzzes, you want to stay abreast, sign up for, follow us on our, to get our notifications, and you can download the app, and I promise you won't be disappointed. It's the best way to stay up on Georgia. I've had so many people tell me that they've read my stories or read a Jeff story or a Connor story when, their phone went off, and man, I was at the store and I didn't even know that happened, but you guys had it and I appreciate it. So in the off season, that's when you want to stay in the know. You don't want to fall behind because there's been a lot of stuff that's happening. In fact, I'm going to promise you a story by the end of the week that will show you just how much has happened. And I bet there will be 2 or 3 things on my list that you didn't even notice. For now, everybody, have a great Tuesday. Thank you, Ingles. Thanks for joining me. And I'll be back here next Tuesday on Dog Nation's On the Beat.
For more Dog Nation videos, check out youtube.com/DogNation.